Presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden has finally announced his running mate. 55-year-old Senator Kamala Harris from California is the vice presidential candidate for the Biden ticket in the 2020 presidential election. Now, taking a look at her bio on the screen here, with her mixed-race heritage, background in law and desire for progressive agendas, the Democrats are aiming to appeal to a greater variety of voters. She's the first Asian American as well as the first black woman to be selected as a major party candidate for VP in US history. But will having Harris on the ticket appeal enough to voters to help the Democrats take back the White House? To discuss this, we have joining us Carl C. Kopko, Adjunct Professor of Political Science at Elizabethtown College, who co-authored the book Do Running Mates Matter? Hi there, it's lovely to see you.
Thank you very much for having me.
We also connect with Andrew Cohen, Associate Professor of Journalism and Communication at Carleton University. Nice to see you today.
Nice to see you.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us. Let's start the discussion with my first question going to Dr. Kopko. So let's start with why Kamala Harris was selected above others like Susan Rice, who Joe Biden was more closely acquainted with, having worked together during the Obama administration.
In brief, it's because Joe Biden probably thought that she was the best person for the job. There's really no other person, perhaps other than Dick Cheney, who knows the office of the vice presidency as well as Joe Biden. It's really evolved in recent decades into an office that has substantial informal power, where the vice president is not only a chief advisor to the president of the United States, but is often charged with bridging the divide between Congress and the White House. So someone like Kamala Harris, who has experience in the United States Senate, but also has political experience at the state level and local level, brings a wealth of political knowledge on how to actually govern, how to manage an operation, how to reach out to political players to achieve a given goal. Now, while Susan Rice certainly has extensive national political experience, or at least experience in the national security area, Senator Harris has a wide range of experiences that could potentially help Vice President Biden govern effectively if elected in November.
And Dr. Cohen, I'd love to hear your view on this as well. I mean, what does Senator Harris bring to the table for Joe Biden?
Well, she brings a wealth of experience at the state and national level. As her resume, which your viewers could see a moment ago, says, Senator Harris was the district attorney of San Francisco. She was the attorney general of California, and she was elected senator from California, which she has represented for the last 3.5 years. California, as you know, is the largest state in the union. It is the most populous state. It's bigger than the country in which I live, Canada. So to be a politician in a state like that suggests an enormous amount of skill, and so experience is something she brings. Obviously, she brings ethnicity. She is of mixed race. There has never been a vice presidential candidate with her heritage. She also brings not just experience, not just intellect, but she brings temperament. And I think a candidate has to have all three in different measures. Her temperament is engaging. She is also, she has the skill of a prosecutor, and she will prosecute the case against Donald Trump, probably more effectively than Joe Biden. That will be part of her job as vice presidential running mate. She is also engaging. She is a very fluid speaker. All these things were on display at the beginning of her presidential campaign. Not so much the end, because it didn't end well for her, but many people have felt for some time in California, for the last 10 years or so, that she is the female Barack Obama. We will soon see.
The female Barack Obama. Well, Dr. Kopko, what does Harris stand for, and what are her political priorities here? And do you think they'll resonate enough with the American public, especially among the black voters, whose turnout in 2016 was actually down 7 percentage points compared to the previous election?
That's an excellent question, and there's actually been some criticism of Senator Harris about what her policy positions are. She has changed her views on a wide variety of issues, including health care, police reform, things of that nature too. And one of the major criticisms lodged against her during her presidential campaign was, why is she running for president? What issues is she most passionate about? And obviously, as Professor Cohen noted, the campaign fizzled out towards the end. Now, I think it's safe to say that Senator Harris is somewhere firmly within the middle of the Democratic Party. She's certainly not as liberal as, say, an Elizabeth Warren, although her voting record within the Senate has become progressively liberal in recent years, presumably because she was amping up for a presidential run. But at the same time, as a former prosecutor, she has been subject to criticism by activists on the left for not doing enough to crack down on police brutality or police misconduct, to say the least. So I think, though, that by being Joe Biden's running mate, Biden is sufficiently comfortable with her, that she is someone who will be able to get out on the campaign trail, be able to advocate for the policy positions that Biden most favors. And I think it's critical to remind viewers that even though this is a presidential ticket, the vice president's role is primarily to assist and advance the objectives of the presidential candidate. So while the vice presidential candidate and eventually the vice president can provide counsel and advice to the president, they are not the ones ultimately making policy decisions. That rests firmly with the president and the presidential candidate.
Right, so she's not stealing the spotlight or setting out any agendas of her own, but being a real solid form of support for President Biden there. And well, Dr. Cohen, the same question goes to you. Given her relatively centre-left place in the spectrum, do you think she can help Biden win over voters in the swing states especially?
Well, interestingly enough, geography, which used to matter in the selection of vice presidential candidates, you would be chosen from a state in which the ticket needed help, no longer applies. So she's from California, a state that the Democrats will easily win. Will she win? I don't think her job is to win in the Midwest. I think that is Joe Biden's job, to woo voters there. I think her job is to bring in people of color, particularly Black women, maybe younger people. There's almost a generational difference between Vice President Biden, who will be 78 on Inauguration Day, and Kamala Harris, who's 55. I think they hope she'll appeal to younger people. There has been a good reaction. So I think that her job is to support him, as Professor Kopko has said, but also to appeal to certain groups, as I say, women, African Americans, younger people, in the hope that they will turn out. Now, remember, the Black vote in the United States that Hillary Clinton got in 2016, perhaps understandably, was a few percentage points lower than what Barack Obama got. Now, it may be impossible for a white man, which Joe Biden is, to do as well among African Americans as Barack Obama did. But they do need, the Democrats are concerned that they raise that figure. And so that is one of the reasons Kamala Harris is on the ticket.
And Dr. Kopko, how important are running mates in US presidential races? I mean, you co-authored the whole book on this, so I suppose you're the best person to ask. How much do voters take excuse me, how much do voters take vice presidential candidates into account when they cast their ballots?
Yes, they are important, but oftentimes their importance tends to be overstated by some political pundits and observers. And as Professor Cohen rightfully noted, geography doesn't have nearly the same influence as it once does. And in fact, our analyses of multiple elections and databases in our new book, Do Running Mates Matter, suggest that running mates very rarely deliver key geographic areas or swing states or even demographic groups. It does happen on occasion, but it's not systematic and it's fairly rare. Where it matters the most, where running mates can influence voters the most, is actually by influencing perceptions of the presidential candidate. So a number of political observers over the years have noted, and even presidential candidates like George W. Bush have noted, that choosing a running mate is truly the candidate's first presidential action. It's something that they're going to have to live with. And if it's not a good choice, voters are going to realize that. We've estimated a number of statistical models of voter databases and opinion polls. And what we find in our analysis is that if voters perceive a running mate as being unqualified, that reflects poorly on the presidential candidate. To provide an example, in the 2008 presidential election, when Sarah Palin was selected as John McCain's running mate, voters who viewed Sarah Palin less favorably or unqualified to be the vice president or perhaps fill in as president one day also questioned John McCain's judgment. Conversely, whenever President Obama selected then Senator Joe Biden as his running mate, that seemed to assuage some fears over Senator Obama being too young or inexperienced to be president. So again, it seems that framing the presidential candidate and providing that key information to voters is perhaps their biggest contribution on the campaign trail.
Well, Dr. Cohen, do you think the Biden-Harris pairing is a strong enough match to beat President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence?
I do, and I think that it would have been a stronger match. It would have been a strong match had he chosen any number of other people. Structurally, the president has big problems in the swing states. He has big problems with certain demographics, which he won last time. People over 65, women without college educations, the suburbs. Donald Trump is in trouble in many places. And so I think that Joe Biden could have won with any number of other candidates. But I do think that Kamala Harris gives him a measure of safety or security. I agree with Professor Kopko that running mates are not going to determine who wins the election. I think the most consequential outcome, most consequential thing about Joe Biden's choice is that he, given his age 78 when he's nominated, when he's inaugurated, if indeed he is very unlikely to run for a second term. Actuarially, he may not get through a first term. And so he may well have chosen his successor when he put Kamala Harris on the ticket, the first Black woman, very likely, I think, to be president by 2025.
Well, Dr. Kopko, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think the pair, the Biden-Harris combination, do you think it's strong enough to win against President Trump and Mike Pence?
I think it's certainly possible. It will be a very competitive ticket. And I agree with Professor Cohen that there are a number of factors that are working against the Trump campaign in the 2020 presidential election. And I just want to also echo the sentiments of Professor Cohen. I couldn't agree more that this also sets the stage for the future of the Democratic Party. If Joe Biden wins in November and he's either unable to fulfill his term of office or if he decides not to run for re-election in 2024, presumably Kamala Harris would be the de facto leader of the Democratic Party. So in making this selection, it's a more important selection, I'd say, than the typical running mate choice in recent election cycles. This is someone who could significantly shape the future of the Democratic Party, and for that reason, it is of historic significance.
Well, Dr. Kopko, President Trump's camp has been very quick to criticize. They've already branded Harris a phony figure representing the radical left. And the president himself has called her nasty he's called her nasty multiple times. How effective do you think this line of attack will be with undecided American voters?
It's unclear at this stage, and there's a lot to happen between now and November, too. I think certainly a lot depends on how Senator Harris will respond on the campaign trail. A lot depends on whether or not there are any gaffes or scandals. I don't have any reason to believe that there would be any complications or that she would have any mishaps or anything of the sort. But this is a typical campaign strategy, and I would also suspect that Senator Harris will play the attack dog role, more or less, that many vice presidential candidates have played over the years. This is nothing new in terms of campaign strategy, and I expect that this type of rhetoric will probably continue. Will it affect voters? Hard to say at this stage, but I wouldn't say that there's a distinct possibility that it'll lead to significant changes in vote choice for most Americans.
And Dr. Cohen, what are your thoughts on this? What are some challenges that the Biden-Harris ticket faces going up against President Trump?
Well, President Trump will launch a scorched earth campaign. He used the word nasty in relation to Kamala Harris 4 times, as he likes to apply that term to women. His arguments will be sexist and racist. I am confident. Already we're seeing that. Their challenges will be to overcome that, to hope that Americans are not listening to Donald Trump anymore, and there's evidence to suggest they are not. But more than that, to drive turnout. The Democratic coalition, minorities, the young, increasingly now older people who seem to be joining it, women, have to, where Joe Biden has a significant lead in the gender gap. Their job is to ensure they all vote. I think there's a high level of enthusiasm in the Democratic Party. I note that the Democratic Party raised $13 million in 24 hours. It has raised that, or 20 million of 30 million. They had raised some the day before, since the announcement. My understanding, my sense from where I sit, is that there is great enthusiasm for the ticket. The people will turn out. They'll vote by mail or they'll vote some other way. But it is the challenge of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to ensure they go to the polls and vote and be undeterred by COVID or Donald Trump's rhetoric, which is to dampen and tamp down the vote.
Well, now that we know who all the players are, I suppose we can expect this presidential race to heat up even more. And well, I'm afraid that is where we're going to have to wrap up the discussion today. That was Dr. Kopko, Adjunct Professor of Political Science at Elizabethtown College, and Dr. Andrew Cohen, Associate Professor of Journalism and Communication at Carleton University. Thank you both so much for joining the programme.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, thank you for watching. Have a great day or evening wherever you are. Goodbye.